As the progress of accelerated global warming goes on, we hear more and more about how our polar ice caps are melting at accelerated rates. But how does that affect us? Hi, my name is Brian Figueroa, and this is Kelby. Today, we'll be taking a cursory look at some of the effects of this global climate crisis and the effects on our ice caps and sheets, our glaciers, our icebergs, ice shelves, and how all these factors affect life in Florida. First, we gotta define a few terms in order to have a good understanding of what we're talking about. First off, polar ice caps is some of all the polar ice on Earth. Glaciers, bodies of ice that originate on land and then move down a slope due to their mass. Icebergs, they're broken off of glaciers and ice shelves, they're smaller chunks. Ice shelves, platforms of ice connected to land floating over the ocean. And finally, sea ice, a floating ice layer formed when the temperature drops below -1.9 degrees Celsius.
Melting sea ice by itself doesn't contribute to rising sea level, but due to its reflectivity, it has an impact on global temperatures. Periods with less sea ice and snow create a positive feedback loop that accelerates global warming. Our ice on land does the same, but the consequences of ice on land melting are much greater. When glaciers and ice sheets melt, they increase sea level and also introduce fresh water into normally saline ecosystems. Having warmer water also increases the global temperature. Sea ice is not only important for reflecting sunlight, it also affects the water below it. When ice forms, it pushes out salt and concentrates it within and below where life thrives. In this hypersalinated water, you can find different forms of bacteria, plankton, and crustaceans that wouldn't be able to flourish without this environment. This concentration of salt also affects our ocean currents. The ultrasaline water is denser and sinks below, creating what researchers call the Atlantic coastal current, which is the only global current we have. When fresh water is introduced in this system, the already slow period of flow, which is 1,000 years, slows down even more.
That's good. As a Florida resident, it's really important to know our proximity to the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico. We're surrounded by water in Florida. Florida also has a really, really low elevation, with the highest point only being like 345 feet above sea level. That's like nothing. If all the glaciers and ice caps were to melt, the sea level would rise up to 230 feet. And the average elevation of Florida is only 100 feet above sea level, meaning that less than half of the polar ice caps need to melt for nearly all of Florida to be submerged underwater. To conclude, we'd like to suggest some preventative measures to you. Although there are a lot of ways to go about these issues, we believe the onus falls mostly on corporations and regulatory industries and agencies. Taking steps to lower your own carbon footprint should be encouraged. But 36 companies contributed to over half of these emissions in 2023, which is a 0.7% increase since 2022. It's a ton. A lot more than a ton. Gigatons. They're not showing any signs of stopping. Corporations prioritize shareholder value and profits over everything else. That's their main goal. They won't regulate themselves out of the kindness of their hearts because they don't got one. And the only way to prevent these damages to our ecosystem are regulation and legislation.